Do you ever want to dive deeper into the Bible, but you just don't know where to begin or struggle to feel like you even have the time? When you read the Bible, do you get frustrated because you know there is so much more in there, you just have no clue how to get it out? Or maybe you just want to know the Bible better, and so you're looking for any resource to help. Well, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Context and Color of the Bible podcast. We are two sisters. I'm Erica.
I'm Veronica.
We love to study the Bible and help others understand it better. When it comes to our own study of Scripture, we have found that in bringing back the context of Scripture, it adds to our understanding. It actually adds color to the black and white pages of the text.
You know, in real time when everyone's listening to this, they're hearing it 1 week and then the next week and the next week. So they have really good context of what we've talked about in the last two episodes. But in reality, we did this. I know we did chapter 2. I want to say before you went to NRB.
Yeah. So
that was February.
6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago.
I know. So in case you feel like, wow, they say the same thing and they just said it last week, that's partly why. Is because we have a month in between each recording.
No, it's because repetition is good for the audience.
That is true. But sometimes you go, wow, you asked that already. And he answered it. Remember what he said a week ago. It's been a month at least.
Yeah. We're all getting old. Our memories are going away.
I know. That is becoming a theme of getting older. Yes. Hitting 40 kind of just, you feel it. And all those 70-year-olds who are listening are like, oh. We love you, Mom and Dad. All right. But we are in Micah chapter 3 today.
Yes, chapter 3.
Does that sound right?
Well, where to begin?
Normally verse 1.
So I use this analogy when I taught this some weeks back. You ever watch The Twilight Zone?
Yeah, I have a father who loves that. Yes.
So do you remember the episode To Serve Man?
No, she won't remember it.
Oh, man. So there's these benevolent aliens that come and land on Earth, and they promise peace and prosperity for everyone, and all the world's leaders come and gather together and listen to them. I think there's like this United Nations kind of scene, and the aliens are like, yeah, we're going to help you. And as they're on their way out, they leave behind this manual, this book, and they go to start operating their plans of bringing peace and prosperity. So meanwhile, the whole episode focuses on these two, this man and woman, these cryptographers, and they're trying to translate the alien language.
Okay, and they're humans.
They're humans, and partway through, they get to at least translate the cover of the book, the manuals to serve man. And they're like, okay, well, this is great. This is their instruction manual of how they're going to bring us peace and prosperity. And sure enough, over time, the aliens set up ambassador places all over the world, and people are flying to the aliens' home planet. And it's so great. And there's so much peace that everybody just, says, they put down their weapons and the world is just amazing. And so these two cryptographers are pretty much out of a job because they were all about breaking codes and trying to
figure out the whole manual.
Yeah, the enemies. They were supposed to be for like wartime things.
Okay.
And so the main guy gets on he's boarding the UFO to fly to the alien homeworld, and the woman comes running up. She's like, don't get on. I just translated the inside of the manual. And then the famous line, it's a cookbook. But it's too late. He can't get off the steps, and he's forced to get in.
Oh, no.
And so then the end of the episode is him flying to be dinner.
That makes me think of the silver chair.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
When they're in the
the giants.
They're like Marshwiggle and Man Pie. And
Yep. Well,
really
so
bummed me out.
chapter 3 in Micah is...
So wait, is this a manual to eat people?
In a sense, it is. In a sense, it's how not to eat people. Yeah, so chapter 3 of Micah, he he's continuing his legal argumentation against the unfaithful people of Israel. And there's many pictures of eating and consuming in this chapter. Oh. He is, and where one of the reasons I use the Twilight Zone episode specifically is because that episode is a commentary how it serves to be a warning against just blind trust of anyone who comes along, especially people who appear to be benevolent, but you don't know what their motives are. Mm-hmm. So I think Micah 3 is using a similar kind of eating metaphor, and he's flipping the coin on the other side. It's not as much a concern for the common people. The Twilight Zone's the concern, common people and their blind trust of those in leadership. Here now in Micah, he's calling out the people in leadership and using that metaphor of eating and consuming. And the leaders are consuming those that they're supposed to be responsible for. So, yeah, as I mentioned, he's continuing his legal discourse. And in one of the earlier chapters, we talked about there's 3 movements in the book of Micah. There's a doom and a hope. So if you imagine the shape of a V, chapters 1 and 2 are doom, and then the end of chapter 2 is a V up with hope. Chapter 3 begins the second movement, so we're starting the downward slide on that second shape of a V, and it's the doom section. And then 4 and 5 are the hope section of the second movement. So Micah begins his argumentation and calls out, he's like, "Hear you heads of Jacob and rulers of Israel, is it not for you to know justice? You who hate the good and love the evil, and you who tear the skin from off my people, and their flesh from off their bones, who eat the flesh of my people, and flay their skin from off them, and break their bones in pieces, and chop them up like meat in a pot, like flesh in a cauldron."
That's graphic.
Yeah, it's
and visual.
Probably, one of the more graphic, like just gruesome, straight up. And that's his whole point here. And God's point, he wants to communicate how serious the sin is that these leaders are doing right now. And he's trying to get their attention. This is disgusting what you're doing. And so he's painting the people, they're like almost cannibalistic, and since the time I originally taught this, and now we've had that situation in the news. Like, what's the whole point of being...
Oh, Haiti?
Yeah, what's going on in Haiti. That's one of the whole points of cannibalism is this, like, power that's just gone out of control, like this animalistic, I'm sure demonic sense. And unfortunately, they're doing it literally. Micah's saying... In a spiritual sense, guys, this is what you're doing. You're going around just blood dripping from your mouths as you're just consuming and taking advantage of these people that are powerless to stop. They're callous to the human suffering that's going on around them. In fact, they're causing this. And so Micah's calling out this. And I think back in verse 1, there's a bit of a double entendre here, because Micah's saying, "Is it not for you to know justice?"
Oh, that's going to come up.
It's
Micah 6, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it comes back around there. But even just within the context of chapter 3, there's an intentional double meaning. Shouldn't you know justice? Like, know was the Hebrew word yada. Remember, Adam knew his wife Eve, and they conceived. So there's like this intimate knowledge is what the word is in the understanding in Hebrew. And Micah's saying, shouldn't you guys, you're leaders of this society. You're the ones that are appointed, maybe judges, political leaders, other people. You have the power to do something. Shouldn't you know justice? And I think there's a double meaning there because on the one hand, shouldn't you be, justice, shouldn't you be practicing it? You're
even Leviticus 19, that's the chapter on justice and righteousness. And that, I'm studying that right now because we're actually in real time doing Leviticus. And the whole point of chapter 19, that's the center of the book. And the central meaning of this is who God is. He is a God of justice. You're supposed to be the people who do righteous and who have justice. And you go, okay, that's the whole point. That's your job. You have been trained up to be that representative to the world.
So shouldn't you know?
So you should know it.
Justice? And not only is it a statement of like, I'm ripping my hair out. Shouldn't you know justice, guys? But it's also a statement of a threat. You're going to know justice. It's coming.
Oh, I don't like those.
So I think there's an intentional double meaning in that. But that's a great connection to Leviticus because that's a core document. That's and
that's foundational. I keep saying Leviticus is actually foundational to the rest of the Bible.
Right. And that in and of itself shows these guys, they don't have an excuse. Right. It's not like, oh yeah, I missed class that day.
Right. I was asleep for that hour of the presentation.
No.
This has been their whole lives here. No. I mean, if you think they started memorizing Leviticus is the first book they memorized, you've grown up since you were, and that would be more Jesus's day, age 5, but this is
still foundational.
Still foundational. Somewhere along before Jesus' day, it became, these are the books, the order we're memorizing in.
And possibly because of situations like this, after the exile to Babylon, they recognized maybe we need to get serious about this whole...
Understanding what God told us to do.
Yeah. So let's start the kids memorizing.
Right.
All right. So back to 3 here. So as is the case, especially with Micah, but definitely in the prophets, so we get a punishment that fits the crime here. These guys are, in verse 4, these leaders, these cannibalistic people, then they're going to cry out to the Lord, but he will not answer them. He's going to hide his face from them at that time because they have made their deeds evil. So, their punishment is a time's coming, God said, where you're going to be in dire need of help. These people are in need of help. And what are you doing? I'm just eating them up. I'm chopping off flesh, throwing it in the pan. It's sizzling and I'm just gorging myself. And God's saying, no, there's going to be a time where you're going to be in need of help. And you're going to be calling out to who? To me, God's saying. And I'm not going to answer. You're going to experience the full weight of these consequences alone, on your own. And that's when you're going to know justice. Because apparently you're supposed to know it now, but you will know it intimately. And there is a bit of similarity in groups between chapters 2 and chapter 3. You have these people in chapter 2 that are devising wicked schemes on their beds at night when they should be sleeping and resting in the blessing of peace that God gives. They're like cogitating and how can I take advantage of? So there is some parallels. But the lesson I take away here, at least from this group, is, there's so many great examples of shepherds in the Bible. They're like entrusted to protect the flock, even if I need to lay down my life, as Jesus said, for my flock. Here, they're eating the flock, and it's like, don't eat your flock. You're a leader. I don't, as a listener, I don't know what places God has put you, but you certainly are in a leadership position at some level. Is it a Sunday school? Is it a Bible study? Is it, are you a manager at work? Are you, you got a family or grandkids, or like you have leadership? And this is a clear example of where God is saying, I don't put you in these positions so that you can take advantage of, so that
Right.
you get to feed on the life force of everyone else and aggrandize yourself. It's about serving others. You think about Jesus in Matthew 20, it's about my kingdom. I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. And he came to give his whole life up as a ransom for us. So that was just the take-home lesson, at least from this first group that I...
Okay. That's a good lesson. A good reminder.
You know, the next group?
I don't know.
Are you cogitating? Are you
a little
thinking?
worried.
Oh, we get our friends. So like in chapter 2, so Micah was railing against those wicked schemers, and then this religious group comes along to the support of those wicked schemers, and then Micah had to kind of turn his guns their direction. So same kind of thing here in verse 5 of chapter 3. We've talked about these wicked leaders. They're eating the people, just tearing them limb from limb. And then God says, "Thus says the Lord concerning the prophets who lead my people astray." And these prophets are crying out peace. And when are they crying out peace? When they have something to eat. So we're continuing that eating, consuming theme, that picture. So they cry peace when they have something to eat, but they declare war on him who doesn't put anything into their mouths.
Wow.
So we continue this. Yeah. This graphic eating, gluttonous, kind of cannibalistic theme. All these pictures carry forward. And it's an interesting word that is used, which verse? In verse 5, where it says, so the Lord says, to those when they have something to eat. I'm looking for the right translation because I don't really care for the way that the ESV has it. The Hebrew word there is the Hebrew word nashak. It's not the normal word for bite.
Oh.
Or not the normal word for like eating. I should clarify. Nashak literally means to bite or strike.
Okay.
And it's used 11 times in the Old Testament, 10 of which are in the context of dealing with snakes.
Oh.
So it's that kind of, it's
How many
not just...
passages are on snakes?
At least 10.
No, I'm thinking like Moses and the snakes.
Well, and some of it deals with nashak in a figurative sense in dealing with interest and financial terms. So there's a snake kind of concept there.
So maybe Proverbs.
Yeah, Proverbs.
Okay. Okay, so I've got NIV. As for the prophets who leads my people astray, if one feeds them, they proclaim peace. If he does not, they prepare to wage war against him.
Yeah, so if
what word would it be?
The feeding, so I think the English, they're trying to like figure out what does this mean, like this strike word.
Okay.
And so they're trying to translate it dynamically. Literally it's if they're able to strike or bite,
okay,
then they will be happy.
Wow.
But if their stomachs are empty, then they're not. And that word is intentional because we're portraying these false prophets. What are they like? Snakes.
Okay.
They're like snakes, and they're ready to strike. So I kind of pictured this. Imagine you're going to work. You have to go from home to work every day, and you have to cross the path, and there's this snake that is there. And, first day you come along, no worries. I'll just take a little bit of my lunch and throw it there, and the snake has something to strike at, and it fills them. But day after day, you keep doing this.
He's growing.
And he's growing. And what's happening to your stockpile at home? It's less and less.
Because I'm picturing the
less.
snake going from a mouse to a rat to a rabbit to a chicken.
And you got to feed them a little more
Yeah.
and a little more and a little. And then one day you just don't have anything. And you don't have enough.
Human size.
And now what's he going to do? Well, when their stomachs are empty, they're going to cry out war. Well,
Sure.
what does that mean? It means war on you.
On you. I'm coming after you.
Yeah. What seems to happen is that they turn the community, they turn society. They use their religious influence, and suddenly now you're the target of whatever persecution is about to happen, or you're on the wrong side. Oh, you know what? Veronica just hasn't been, saying her prayers, guys, and you start to feed these rumors, and you start to turn the community against them because they're using faith and their religious authority for their own ends. You're no longer lining their pockets, so now what are they going to do? They're going to go after you because you're no more use to them. And yeah, this awful. Unfortunately, and this is in the realm of faith community. This isn't the political
Someone from in
leaders.
the group.
Yeah, and a religious leader. If you've ever listened to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast, you would hear stories of where if you weren't stroking the right person's ego, they would turn and bite and strike. And that's unfortunately still a reality, even in our day and age. It's not just, those bad people in Micah's day. Like, it's still...
Right. And it's what kind of person are you? I mean, because you kind of go, at some point, it starts small. You know?
Yep.
You don't just all of a sudden wake up one day and go, I'm going to take out people who stand against me, who speak against me. It's kind of one of those probably little, slowly over time. Oh,
little by little.
That worked. Oh, this person... just going from that mouse to the rat, even in the person even in that prophet who's doing it, it probably happened gradually.
Right.
I don't think many people wake up and go, I'm going to be evil today.
No. And yeah, it starts with baby steps in the wrong direction for sure. So like the earlier group, now the punishment will fit the crime. Verse 6, because therefore it shall be night to you without vision, darkness to you without divination. The sun's going to go down. All these pictures of blackness, of darkness, of silence. In verse 7, the seers will be disgraced, the diviners put to shame. And so the punishment that fits the crime is this fourfold picture of blindness. They're going to be lost in the dark. And what good is a prophet who has no vision, who can't see? They're worthless.
Right.
And I love this, how Micah brings this whole theme of biting, consuming, eating, like brings it to this fitting conclusion in verse 7, because they're going to be disgraced because the prophets lose their vision. God's going to leave them again, like the other group, alone, silent. He's not going to speak to them. And because of the shame that they encounter, what do? They cover their lips. And I was researching this when I was about to teach this. Anthropologists have noted there's a universal movement that all humans do across cultures when they're like shocked.
Oh.
And it's like cover my mouth with my hands. It's just this instinctual thing that we have. But it's such a fitting conclusion because this group, like we've got two groups of wicked people that are using their own positions for power. And here now, what's going to happen? You're no longer biting and consuming. In fact, you're so ashamed and so shocked at what's happening. They've covered their own mouths. So
you can't bite and consume anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
But then Micah jumps in verse 8 and he compares and contrasts himself with these prophets. He's like, okay, that's what you guys are like. But as for me, here's what I'm like. Here's what a true prophet is like. He's filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, with justice and might, to declare Jacob his transgression and to Israel his sins. And we don't get a lot of biographical detail about Micah. We know his hometown, we know the time period he spoke, but unlike other prophets where you get these great snippets of what they were like, here we get a moment like Micah's passionate, he's zealous, and he's disassociating himself from these wicked people. He's like, no, I'm not full of food, so to speak, that I've consumed. I'm not full of poor people that I've taken advantage of. What am I full of? Power that comes from the Holy Spirit. And specifically power to call out justice, to call out, this is truth. He's been given a mighty strength by the Holy Spirit to stand up. And I think his power wasn't in like Incredible Hulk style strength. It was in
get bit by a spider.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an Incredible Hulk.
Spider-Man. Like his power was to have this moral conviction and to speak truth in a society where he was probably, I don't know about a lone voice, but
not a lot
of people. And that takes a lot of gut. That is hard.
That was a hard road to walk.
But that's the type of power and strength that the Spirit had given him. He's not bashing skulls in. I mean, as much as he would have wanted to like right the wrongs, he's like, I'm going to stand in the face of it, the currents of this generation and speak truth. So yeah, I guess the concluding thought here is, being, praying for the Spirit that you wherever you're at in this day, pray that the Spirit is strengthening you, because likely you are going to be in situations, whether great or small, where you're going to have to stand fast against the currents of this day and age, and pray that you're not driven by the appetites of more food, more wealth, more power, more fill in the blank. Pray that you're filled with the power of the Spirit, just like Micah was, to stand firm when that day comes. And I pray to the Lord that it isn't a situation where you have to stand firm against false prophets, because that's a whole harder level. But, whether it's in the schools or in the, society, at the workplace, or, at the store, like wherever.
Well, you expect it in the world.
Yes,
and you go,
exactly.
Okay, in the world, I'm prepared to take this stand. But when I'm doing it in the church, then it's harder.
And I think that's what he's fighting against the religious community.
Wow. Okay.
So then there's 3 sections here in chapter 3. In this last section, then it doesn't focus as much on one specific group as it's more of a capstone argument. Verse 9, Micah calls out the heads of Jacob and the rulers of the house of Israel. So verse 9 is kind of an intro statement. He's talking to the leaders again, and let's just, in your mind, zoom up to 30,000 feet. These leaders who are building Zion with blood and building Jerusalem with iniquity. And then these leaders, these heads, give judgment for a bribe. So you get a sense we're talking judicial leaders. The priests who teach for a price. So the priests in the temple, that aspect of religious leaders. And then the prophets who practice divination for money. So 3 different subgroups of leaders are pointed out here. And Micah saying they're building Jerusalem with blood. And so historically what's going on, I think there's a backdrop here of in this time period, as a reminder, Micah, his ministry was about 750 the 750 to 700 BC.
Okay.
So somewhere in that 50-year zone. And hit right smack dab in the middle of his ministry would have been the fall of Samaria in the north. They fell to the Assyrian Empire. Well, what happened, Assyria certainly took the higher level people of society back with them into exile. But what about all the other people that were left, the people that fled at the onslaught of the army? Well, there was a massive refugee displacement. They come pouring in from the northern kingdom to the southern kingdom during the time of Micah. And if you look up maps of ancient Jerusalem around the time of Hezekiah, you can find where they have archaeology that notes how the size of Jerusalem it grew 3 or 4 times the original size during this time period.
Okay. Because all these people are coming in.
Due to this massive influx of refugees and, the turmoil of that generation of what's going on. Well, what happens when you get a massive group of defenseless people who are all in need?
You run out of supplies and resources. And you need leadership to organize the chaos.
The corruption and the ability to take advantage and use these people for political pawns. Not that you see any of that.
You need a blanket
today, but
I'll take your firstborn child type.
Yeah, slavery.
Yeah,
massive amounts of.
You're at my mercy.
And so now we get a backdrop to this picture of cannibalism, so to speak. Again, I don't think they were having literal cannibalism. I think it was a figurative. But all of this is taking place. Well, you've got this urgent situation, vulnerable population. You've got chaos, and it's rife for this corruption. So what can happen? Judges can judge for a price. If you pay me enough, then I'll see your case, because you know what? There's a lot of people waiting in line, and it just got 3 times longer. So these decisions in Micah's day were going to the people that could pay the highest, who can pay the most. Well, you get the decision. And the priests, they're supposed to be in the service of God, but they're earning a living by kind of bending. I'll teach on, if someone just put a little bit more money in the offering plate, and then I'll teach on whatever topic you'd like, or I'll make sure to ignore the topic you don't want to. So you start to see how, like, this bending and twisting, like, what can that do when it's amplified over the entire population? And the worst one is that the prophets, what are they doing? He says they're practicing divination for money. I think divination, doesn't that show up in Leviticus?
Yes, it does. That would be chapters 18 and 20, right around the center of justice and righteousness.
And that was something they were okay with, right?
Hardly. You're supposed to not be like Egypt and Canaan, and that's where chapters 18 and 20 of Leviticus, it's all about don't be like these other religions, and you take that out. And so then in the center then is 19, which then stands as the brighter, here's
this
what
is
you
your
are
North
to be
Star.
like.
Right. So the prophets that were purporting to be from God are practicing divination.
I think they said they're supposed to stone them and get rid of them. I think there was some major consequences.
And they were doing it because the price was right. So I kind of picture it. Apparently the people were trying to seek insight from the Lord, maybe guidance, and he wasn't giving them guidance, or
he's being quiet.
And sometimes as a parent, you know why you're being quiet. And so they decided, well, maybe if we just start coughing up money, then okay, well, if you're going to pay me, then I'll go to some alternative methods to find divine insight. So they're willing to compromise. And that's, be like saying, okay, well, Pastor, is it okay if I just start pulling out the Ouija boards and the tarot cards? Because I've been praying and I just feel like God's not answering me.
Right.
Then Pastor will be like, oh, sure, that's okay.
It's another
I
way
don't
to do it.
think so.
Wow.
So that's that's what they've sunk to the point of being, pagan prophets at that point. And you're like, this is horrific. You got this massive group of helpless people. You've got the leaders that are supposed to be adhering to this North Star kind of ideal in Scripture, and they're willing to just do whatever for money. You're like, how can you do this? How can you justify this? You want to like have Micah say like, why? What's going on? Why is this? Well, the answer is in the second half of verse 11. It says, yet they, that's these wicked judges and priests and prophets, they lean on the Lord and say, is not the Lord in the midst of us? No disaster is going to come upon us. So that
that sounds like a challenge to the Lord.
So
just gonna say it. Sounds a little audacious, and
they're saying, well, how do we justify this behavior? Well, look over there. The temple's standing there. It's like silently but incontestably seem to support these leaders. God's stamp of approval is right there on everything we're doing. Right? You love the fallacies. Which fallacy is that one? I looked it up because I'm not as good as you.
Which one is it?
It's the appeal to tradition fallacy.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the way it's always been, so that's the way it's going to always be.
That makes sense.
So there's a new one for your quiver. So they're using the existence of God's temple as like this talisman or like God's tacit approval on their, as long as his temple's there, he's okay with what we're doing. So Micah, just take a hike. That's the essence. So then what does God say in the last verse of chapter 3? Therefore, because of you, Zion will be plowed as a field. Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins, and the mountain of the house, what's the house?
The temple.
A wooded height, like this deserted, overgrown forest because of you guys.
Wow.
So God's saying, you guys are going to use my house as justification for your wickedness? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do with my house.
It's gone.
Yeah. And it strikes me because, like, if in my neighborhood, say all my neighbors were using my house, like, well, the fact that you live here means we can go do whatever. Would I be willing to burn my own house down? And what does that say about God's willingness to sacrifice his own dwelling?
That's a serious penalty, consequence. And because in a sense, by taking my dwelling, I'm removing my presence.
He's removing,
You don't even get my house, but because my house isn't there, you don't get my presence anymore. Because and that's part of Leviticus. That's such a big thing, a momentous occasion in Leviticus 9 when the fire falls, and finally God's presence descends. And then you have it again when Solomon builds the temple, and you have God's presence descend of, okay, we've pleased God. He's willing to live among us, and to go, okay, I don't know what's stronger than not pleasing him, but we've so turned him off to it. We're such a stench to him,
right,
that he completely removes everything from us.
Yeah, and what happens when his presence is removed? Like, I'm speaking more like of the city, of the community. Like, what is going to happen when
you don't have
that,
you
it
don't
just
have
implodes.
any protection, any kind of
right.
You don't have that moral compass anymore. Nothing driving anybody to do what is right, to look out for their neighbor, to do justice, to do rightly.
I picture it's like the hedge of protection is now removed, and everything that you guys have coming is going to come upon you.
Well, because you kind of go in a way, and I don't know if this is, I'm not saying this is true, but in a way, God's protection is just that, okay, my presence is here, therefore the enemies can't come. It's that that shield. And then when I remove the shield, when the shield goes down, okay, all kinds of attacks
Right.
can happen.
You're exposed. Yeah.
Yikes.
There's another aspect to it, which I don't know if it's a different thought or a complementary thought, but the fact I see also God saying, if my house is a roadblock, if it's causing you guys, I'm willing to get rid of it. To
if you think
restart
it's your stamp
this.
of approval.
Yeah. So there's an aspect where it's a bit of a pre-Christ-like symbol. Like this is an aspect of God's presence that he's willing to let suffer and be destroyed. Now, Haggai, I mean, there's other prophets that come back and talk about it will be rebuilt. And, this does not signify that God doesn't care about his temple, that he never liked it, that he doesn't
Right. That he's turned his back on Israel.
Yeah.
And his people.
This signifies the deep nature of their sin and how, like, God loved dwelling in the midst of his people in his temple. And the fact that he was willing to let that go up to.
But also, wasn't that part of the curses of Leviticus 18 and 20 and Deuteronomy of, if you reject me, if you disobey,
Yep.
here's what's going to happen. I will remove my face from you for a time. I will remove my presence for a time. Because in a way you kind of go, okay, Israel, you think you've got it all and you have to hit rock bottom. And so they're on their way down.
Yep. And he's going to let them do that here. So Zion, being plowed like a field, all of these are hints at it's just going to be, every building will be torn down. It's going to be plowed over. I noted there's nothing more painful to a farmer than having to plow under a crop. It's like your last resort. And the only reason, when I researched, one of the main reasons a farmer would plow under the crop is because the crop is diseased and it's beyond, you just got to start over. And it does recall back to chapter 1 where Samaria's fate was similar. All the stones were going to be torn down. And so you get this eerie echo of like, oh, even not only Samaria's foundations are going to be exposed, but also Jerusalem's foundations are going to be laid bare. So it seemed like God's saying, like, guys, you gotta stop because this is where it's going. And you can kind of sense the pleading, there is a threat and there is a heaviness to it, but there's also like, don't keep serving each other up on platters. Like we've got to stop this because this is where it's going to head.
Wow. Final thoughts
But
there?
I was in the sermon.
No, we're going to.
Oh, you're going to end here?
Yep, we're ending here.
Okay.
Because there's a bonus episode.
I think he just...
Because that's not really related to chapter 3.
Okay. Yes. So with that, Erica wants to get into our bonus episode that's coming out on Wednesday. And Bryan was kind of like, you know what? First of all, we're all looking at the time. And so it's just easier to put some of these separate thoughts as their own extra episode.
But just don't lose hope. Like this is the pivot point. And chapter 4 pivots into hope. And you immediately get an elevated picture of Jerusalem. So you look at this flattened mound at the very end of chapter 3, and in chapter 4, it changes. So you got to come back next week.
Right.
You got to.
But you also got to come to Wednesday.
And hear the bonus episode because you're going to love that too.
Right. So don't forget, as always, we have social media. We have our website. We have Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest. If you have questions for Bryan, you can sign up for our newsletter and then email me, and then I will pass them off to him because he knows everything.
No.
He's who I go to. He's who Erica goes to. And then he's good if he doesn't know. He researches. So, but as always, we'd love to hear your feedback and share this with others. And we'll talk to you on Wednesday and then next week.